Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Talk With Kiet podcast, where we connect people, ideas, and capital to help make a difference in the world. Today, I have my pal, Tobias Sproehnle. Tobias and I will talk about the art of angel investing, as well as his startup journey with the launch of Mooregate Benchmark, a startup he founded in 2018 and sold to Morningstar in 2021. Definitely a legendary startup exit story. Tobias, welcome to the podcast, and I hope I didn't botch your last name.
Absolutely. That was the biggest challenge. Hey, Keith, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So, on this podcast, Tobias, we typically talk about journey. And with you, I love to talk about your entrepreneurship journey and experience and story. And so with that, let's start with your career and how you got into the bug for startup and entrepreneurship.
It was a long journey before I got to that point. God, I was in the corporate world for 25 years. Always very fortunate to be in positions where I was responsible for businesses or smaller business areas. So I always, even in the corporate world, it felt like being an entrepreneur there. Obviously, long time at Market, where I had the pleasure to work with you and a lot of other fantastic people, which was really my start into the wonderful world of indexes. I left Market around the IPO in 2014 and worked for the London Stock Exchange and for Thomson Reuters. Before I left the corporate world end of 2016, 2017, and I started my journey as an angel investor for the first time for a couple of months before then the idea of a startup came up.
And did your angel investment help you with the startup? Like your experience with advising and working with angels?
Absolutely. I mean, I learned a lot. What I did in my first stint in the angel investing world was really I focused on AI companies back then, really deep technology companies who really developed and are developing great technology. The first thing I learned there was I met so many founders who really deal with a real world problem or real world challenge, have a fantastic technology to really solve that, but struggle to tell the world and struggle to commercialize. Right, so I think that was the first lesson that I learned. Not only build a great product to solve a real problem or real challenge, but really at the same time tell your story to the world, and make sure you productize and you commercialize the offering properly. So that was the first and probably the most important lesson that I learned. I think the second one is I think the second one really is really go and get external investors that challenge you, right? I think it's really crucial to have stakeholders who really challenge you even at that early stage, who challenge you and who help you in that early phase.
Yeah, no, that was going to be my follow-on, and so it's great that you thought of it beforehand as well. But the question is this though, right? So yeah, there are a lot of investors that come and challenge you, but how do you decide like what type of investor or what type of skill set from investors that can help you?
So, I mean, when we started our journey with Mooregate Benchmarks, we were fortunate enough to be able to choose our investors, and for us, it was always important that we have investors who understand the industry we're operating in, and that we have investors who really can be sparings partner, right? Where you can really go back and really have a conversation about strategy, where you can really tap into your investors network, and really get all the help that you need, right? Because no surprise there,
Yeah.
it's a tough journey, especially in the first couple of months and years. So really having that sparings partner, which has all the tools and the knowledge, we found extremely important.
So talk about that journey, because you said you were in corporate for 25 years and you transitioned to startup entrepreneurship. Like psychologically, like how was that life work balance and all of that? Like how did that impact you differently?
It was interesting. I mean, I left the corporate world, and as I said, I really was busy with angel investing. I invested in 25 plus companies over a very short period of a couple of months, and what I also did is really taking that step back and really seeing where can I provide the best value, A, and B, what do I want to do, right? What's a fun thing to do? And then one thing led to the other. I met my co-founder, a gentleman I've known for years, and there was one conversation which we always had when we met, which was, why is there so much disruption in the financial space, but when it comes to financial indexes, there isn't. Right, it's an industry which is really dominated by four big players and a couple of niche players, but an industry where existing players can be, and I have to put on my German hat here and be very blunt,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
they can be characterized as slow, inflexible, and a bit greedy, maybe.
yeah,
So we were always amazed that really they can get away with it, and we were both at the point where we said we're ready for something new. So we decided to give it a go and launched Mooregate Benchmarks. But it was really the trigger was really me personally taking the step back and saying, what do I want to do with the couple of years, well, hopefully decades, which are left in my life.
yeah. And so go back to angel investing. So what are the, I guess, what are the sectors you look at, and what are the things you, the key three, four things you prioritize, before you write someone a check?
So when I had my first stint of angel investing in 2017, the focus was very much on, as I mentioned, artificial intelligence. So I really invested in companies which really put artificial intelligence to work, really from salmon farming to reading high yield bond documents. And I've changed that approach now over the last couple of months, where I focus on fintech and on climate tech. So these are the areas where I invest. In terms of what do I look into, that hasn't really changed over the years. I'd really describe it as four buckets. Right, one is it needs to be a passionate founder with skin in the game, or a passionate team of founders, and skin in the game could be defined as a multitude of ways. But I really want to have a team which is excited about the opportunity, or a founder which is excited about the opportunity and puts money where his mouth is. It's number one. Number two is the team in working in a significant market and has a great product. That's probably easier said than actually
Right.
checked. But that's interesting. From the third thing is really from does it click with the founder, right? Some people call it the X factor, i.e., if I spend half an hour or an hour in a call with a founder, is it really someone I can work with, right? Because even given I might not spend a lot of time with the founder or with the founders, I really wanna invest in a company where we really like the founder. And last but not least, really, does the team have an exit strategy? And that might sound odd, especially in an early stage of the company.
Yeah.
But it's definitely something which I have an eye on very early on.
Now, from your experience, is single founder better, or with co-founded team better?
So I obviously am an investor turned entrepreneur turned investor. So I have two views, right?
Yeah.
From an entrepreneurial point of view, I'd really start with a team anytime again, right? There are pros and cons for both, obviously, but given the entrepreneurial journey is 80% dealing with things that you've never done before, where you're uncomfortable, or things that you don't really want to do. It's so much easier if you have one or many partners by your side, who you can work with. So as an entrepreneur, definitely I would go for a team. As an investor, it really depends, right? I'd lean more towards multiple founder companies, but that's not a hard criteria which I use when selecting startups.
Interesting. And I guess the fundraising process that startup goes to, and how they pitch it, like, what gets your attention? Because that initial pitch, the initial engagement, is so important, right? And so, what are some of the techniques that you've seen that actually work really well in terms of getting your attention and say, actually, you know what, I want to talk to the founder, I want to go to the pitch, I actually want to have a follow-up conversation.
You mean as an investor, or
As an investor?
As an investor? It's really what I described as an X factor, right? Do I like the guys? So it's really a journey which I want to go on with the founders, right? I mean, the way I invest is anything from, here's the money, give me a quarterly or semi-annually report, and I don't really have a lot of touch points, all the way up to I invest and I sit on the board, and I can be a sparings partner if the founders want, right? So I really play can play every role, and I'm really looking at the founder to really define how much involved do the founders want to get me. But no matter what role I play, it's a journey, right? And I really see that almost as a bit as a relationship. And in order for a relationship to work, it has to click, right? So that is definitely the single most point, or the most important point that I look into, right?
So
Apart
cultural
and
fit, essentially, right? Cultural fit.
100%,
Yeah.
right? And it's very similar with things that I look at when I hire people, right? At the end of the day, it's someone I would like to work with, or even would like to work for.
Yeah. Okay, so flip that a bit because you're wearing two hats now. So as an entrepreneur, right, and you're raising funding, and you'll be constantly told no all the time. How do you keep going?
That is really, really tough. I mean, when we did our financing round last year, we went broad, right? We went very broad. We went to both strategic and financial investors, and we were fortunate that we got a lot of yeses, but absolutely you got a lot of no's, or don't call me, I call you,
Yeah.
or people disappearing. It is tough, right? And I think that's the most important thing in general, that the founder needs to have, right? Really, the ability to dust off the dirt and get up and walk again. Right, and I was fortunate enough to have two co-founders who really helped me in that process. And every time we got a no, we said, hey, well, let's move on, and let's speak with an investor, with a potential investor who might even be better. So really, I think that ability to fall and then get up again, I think is absolutely important. And by the way, not only in the investing phase, but in general in the whole startup journey.
Yeah. No, definitely. And so, going back to your angel portfolio, and I know there's a thesis, right? You invest in 50, 100 companies. One of them is a 50, 100 bagger, pays off for the 49 mistakes, etc. Is that your thesis, or your thesis actually no? Bet big on the one you believe in, bet small on the ones you're not certain. Like, how do you allocate?
That is probably the toughest question you've asked so far.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone strives to really get the one or two unicorns in the portfolio, right? And I think it's really I'm no different than any other startup investor there. Go broad and really hope that there will be one that pays for all of them. I've slightly changed my approach over the years, starting from areas which I found interesting into going into areas that I really understand, right? So hence the change from artificial intelligence to more fintech approach, because that's the stuff I really understand. And at this stage, I really most of the time only investing in the things that I understand.
Yeah. And so within fintech, what are some of the interesting things you see? What are some of the trends?
I think there's a lot of interesting areas. I mean, taking a step back, what I see really over the last couple of months, where the environment has changed slightly, is that the focus of investors has really slightly changed, right? From looking into businesses who really grow, to really more business who really solve a real problem and really are on track to be profitable. I as an investor always was looking for businesses which really have solve a real world problem.
Yeah, not
with
Afterpay, right?
with a fantastic product, right? I mean, and you and I talked about this before, right? I mean, there are things out there which sounds very, very interesting, but if you dig deeper and say, is there really a real world problem that founder is solving? Very often the answer is no. So I think in terms of that high level perspective, it's really is there a real world problem, and does the founder or does the founder team really have a great technology or a great product to solve that? And that's really across a lot of different areas. So I'm not really limiting myself to certain parts of the financial technology space. I'm really looking broad because I think the opportunities are and will be in all areas, right?
Yeah.
And the only limit is really, well, is there a problem, and does this founder have tools to solve it?
Yeah. Well, let's elaborate as it relates to indices, right? Like how do you see that market and how that continues to evolve?
Yeah, I mean, as I touched on it earlier, it's an interesting market. It's a market which is roughly north of $4 billion this year. It's really a market which is dominated by four big players, which make 80% of the revenues there. And the reason why we started our company was simply because we thought, well, that's not right, because these players are a bit inflexible, a bit slow, and their commercial model is not very appropriate. Some people
Yep.
would call them greedy. So that's why
Greedy is too nice of a word.
absolutely. But that's why we went into this space, right? And I mean, especially the commercial model is, if you think of it, is crazy, right? I mean, they're basically using IP, which in a lot of cases was created 20, 25, 30 years ago, and really monetizing it to this day. And there's not a lot of innovation going on, but the level of fees that they're charging their customers, which eventually the end investor pays by buying a product, is still as it was 20, 30 years ago, when they were still very active in creating this IP. And then that's where we came in, where we said, okay, we can do that in a much fairer way, in a much more transparent fashion, right? And really demystifying the whole world of indexes a bit. So what we did is we started with as a pure consulting company, really designing and administering indexes. And then we really reinvented ourselves in 2019, where we went from consulting company to fintech, because we saw a need for a third business area, which was purely index calculation. And the way we used to do that, without going too much into detail, is really we did that fast, or we're still doing that fast, flexible, and with fair pricing. We leave the IP with our customers, right? So we're basically saying, okay, if you come up with an idea, it belongs to you. what we are doing is helping to implement that idea. So we really working with buy side, sell side, transaction platforms, but also completely exotic players in the space to implement ideas, right? So someone has an idea for an index or an index family where investment or trading products can be based on. We come in and help in design, administration, and calculation. Or someone has an investment or trading product and needs an underlying in the form of an index. We do the same, right? So really making this process completely smooth. We're making it cost effective, and we leaving the customer the choice, right? Whereas if you go to do I want to pick one of the established index providers? No, I don't want, but FTSE is the one that's closest to here. So if you go to a company like that, you basically will get one model, right? And we're different there, right? We say, okay, these are the modules. What do you want to achieve? We do that in a modular fashion, and we leave you the IP so you can fully commercialize the index or the product on the back of the index.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess the follow-on to that was, so you started Mooregate with big aspirations. You're going through a fundraising round, yet you end up selling it. So how do you decide that how do you make that decision to say, okay, now it's time for an exit? And two is identifying the dance partner to continue the journey with. Like, tell me a bit more about that mental gymnastic you went through in this decision process.
Gymnastic is a good description. Someone described it as a roller coaster ride, which I like this as well. So we were out there in an investing round last year, right? We were at the stage where we had good revenues coming in, really had technology at work, and we were looking to get investment to scale up. Someone described it as, you guys nailed it, now you scale it. And I think that was very fitting. So we were out there, and we went very broad. So we went to both strategic and financial investors. The interesting part for me, the first interesting part for me was the interest from strategic investors or potential strategic investors was significantly higher than the interest from financial investors. And I think, or we think, that's simply down to it was a little bit of boring, our value proposition, right? At the end of the day, the index business is, from a technology perspective, taking big amounts of data, averaging and firing them out into the world. So for VCs back then, it wasn't really a business model which was sexy. And I think that has changed, by the way, right? I think people are now more and more looking at business model which have a clear focus, which solve real world problems and which are profitable soon. So we really had a lot of interest from strategic investors, and obviously a couple of strategic investors who were interested in buying the whole shop, and we didn't really want to sell, but we turned down a couple of the offers. Obviously, the conversation with Morningstar continued, and it continued because of a couple of different reasons. One is the visions were aligned, right? So we started Mooregate Benchmarks in 2017, 2018, because we said we really need to bring value for money into this business again, right? We can offer the same things, but really can do it faster, more flexible, and at more attractive rates, right? And Morningstar's index business really came from the same out of the same area, right? I mean, all of Morningstar's business is really focused on what does the end investor get? Does the end investor have the right data? Does the end investor have the right tools to make the right decision? And same thing with Morningstar indexes, right? It's really giving value back to the investor is what it's all about. So the vision of both entities clearly was aligned. In addition to that, Morningstar had two things which we didn't have, which is the brand and data. So that was a fit as well. And then the third thing was really, are these really people that we want to work with, right? And I think at the end of the day, that was the most important point for us, right? Where we really said, are we able to work with the team over there? And obviously we answered that one with a yes. So I'd say, in addition to many other parts, these were the three most important points that we discussed. Is the vision aligned from a strategic perspective? Is there a fit, and can we work with these people? And when I say can we work with these people, I mean not only we as a founder team, but also the whole team, right? So does the whole team really have a good home there? And we answered all of those with a yes, and so that was the reason why we moved forward. We never really had planned to sell the company at such an early stage, but given all these all these boxes were green, we decided to go ahead.
And the next one may potentially be the toughest question, but you were in corporate life for 25 years, you went on entrepreneurship, and now you're back in corporate life. How's been that transition?
I'm not gonna lie. If you've been out there for 4 years.
So hold on a second. If you work at Morningstar, please do not listen to this pod. Just dial off.
No. I'm gonna be very honest. It's. I mean, if you've been out there on a on the full entrepreneur's journey, it is hard to really get used to corporate life again. Right. Now I was very fortunate to really get into an environment where that is not very corporate. But we are a company with now more than 11,000 employees. So there are obviously a lot of corporate structure. So it was tough to get back into these things, and it's ridiculously small things, right? Where you have to get used to it again. But it's been a year now. We just celebrated our first year anniversary. And I managed to really get back into corporate life.
Nice, that's a great transition. And so back to now your angel investing hat. As these angel companies look to hire talent, right? And even when you are Mooregate building the team, like what were some of the criteria you look at, and what are some of the dynamics that made a successful team in your view?
Yeah, great question. I really have a very, very clear view on how I hire and how I also recommend people to the companies that I invest in. First one is really a higher attitude trains skills. You've heard that many times before, but it is absolutely important, right? It's really I've made one or two mistakes where I hired people where I was absolutely sure that they have the skills and the knowledge. But after I hired them, I wasn't so sure whether they have the right right attitude. So I in any case, I would really hire the right caliber of people, even if they don't really have the skill set or 100% of the skill set or the knowledge, right? Because as they say, you can train skills, but you can't train attitude. The second thing is really find someone you want to work with, right? Find someone who's really who could be a co-founder, right? So someone where you say, okay, well, I spent whatever 14, 16, 18, maybe 20 hours a day with that person. So I really want to work with them with that person, right? So really finding co-founder potential is how I would describe it. Is the second thing. The third thing is I'm always trying to hire someone who's smarter than me. A lot of people would say that's easy, but I think it's not easy. So absolutely surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. And the fourth thing is really avoid what I would call a clone trooper approach, right? Where you hire very, very similar people, or even people that are similar to you. I think in order to be successful, you really need to have diverse talent in your team with complementary skills. So I think that is absolutely important as well. And for me, that's no different in whether I hire someone in the corporate world or in a startup. I think for a startup in an early stage, it's probably more important.
Now, do you fire faster in startup than in corporate world, or vice versa? Like, how do you? Because from what I've heard is you don't really decide when you hire because it's hard to tell. It takes time. You decide when you fire. So how do you come to the firing decision? Let's flip that question from hiring to firing.
So I was fortunate enough never to be in that position, but I would assume that you have to be faster in a startup environment because the pressure is simply higher. The pace is faster, right? So I think while in the corporate world you might be able to afford having a situation where you pull someone through and where you're a bit more patient. In the startup world, I think you just can't afford it for longer because of the pressure and the pace. So to answer your question, I think it's you have to be faster in the startup world, right? Or even be better in hiring. So you apply all the criteria that I mentioned earlier. So I think that is even more important, so that you don't even have to be in a position to fire someone.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And then back to the point you made earlier around telling a story, right? Because you have two chunks. You have startup founders that are building amazing products, but they don't know how to tell a story. Like, what's more important, like having the great product or storytelling, or both? Like, how do you balance that?
I'd even say that the storytelling is more important than the product. I mean, it goes hand in hand. I really, especially when I started angel investing, I really came across so many companies who developed that fantastic product in the ivory tower or the basement or wherever, but really forget to tell the world about the product. Right, and by the way, some also forgot to sell the product, which is even worse. So yeah, while building a strong product is absolutely important, I believe that even in the early stage of a startup, telling you a story is absolutely crucial, right? And we did that from a very early stage, right? Where a lot of people said, "Are you really investing money in PR before you even have a proper product out there?" And for me, it was really really important to invite people onto the journey with me, and it resonated with a lot of people, right? Where we told the story on, okay, why we think the industry is broken, and how are we changing that, right? It really resonated with the people. And then as we had our first successes, right, whether that's products that we roll out, or whether that's customers that we won, we basically um, proven to the world that we can deliver, right? And people
Yeah.
looked at it and said, "Oh wow, these guys are getting traction." I think it's really really important that people notice you, and that people. That people listen to your story, and we were very fortunate in the early days that by telling that story in a very structured way, we had a lot of incoming business, right? Because people
Yeah.
said, "Hey, we heard what you're doing. We really think that's great. Can you come in? Can you help us with X, Y, Z?" So a long wound answer to your question. I think it's absolutely important, right? And I really advise and I recommend every founder to really think about that in a very early stage, right? Not only building the product and productizing and commercializing it, but also telling the story.
Yeah, and if I understand correctly, you actually hire a PR person very early on, right, on the
Ab- abs-
Mooregate
abs- ab-
journey.
absolutely, right? And people, that's what when people said, "Well, are you really, really crazy
Yeah, yeah,
to do that?" But I think it was really the best investment I've ever made, right? Because she was really able to really orchestrate and formulate the storytelling for us.
yeah. Now, so before I flood your inbox with a lot of incoming from people, now you were very clear in terms of what you're looking for in fintech, right? You also mentioned climate tech. So, what are some of the areas within climate tech you're looking at?
I'm looking very broad again, right?
Yeah,
But I think it's about solving real problems, right? And I think in order to really tackle the climate crisis, there's a lot of things to be sorted out, right? I invest in a couple of different categories, but it's really the overarching theme is how can we avoid the climate disaster which is around the corner, right? And
that's
and
right.
and and I think what it is, it's more the solving short-term problems, right? I think we can't really wait and really come up with these long-term plans. I think we need to start now to avoid the crisis that is around the corner, or that some people say we're already in the midst of. So it's really these startups who have an idea, who have the technology to start solving the problems now. I know that's a very very vague description of my investment thesis there, but it's really that's what it is. It's very broad.
Yeah, and so I am definitely on the same page, right? That's the reason why I invested in Clean Energy Prospector from like 2013, because climate change is not a myth; it's real. Like we need to all work together in solving this in a proactive way. And so I'm 1,000% in agreement. So the question then is, if I'm a founder, if I'm a startup, like how do I reach you? What's the best avenue to get in touch with you?
LinkedIn is always the best way. So drop me a LinkedIn message. And I'll get back to you right away. I promise I will not waste any time, and I will be 100% clear about yes, interesting or no. Don't call me again. That's another thing which I learned in the startup journey. You unfortunately have so many potential investors who don't say no. That's one of the things that that I learned as well. It's really something where I say will give companies a clear no if I'm not interested.
Great. Well, Tobias, thank you so much for being on today. It's been an honor and a pleasure. I'm sure that those that are listening learn so much from your insights, whether it's as an entrepreneur or like myself as an angel investor. So thank you so much.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Keith.
Yeah. And so for those that are still listening, again, as always, thank you for your continued support. And please do like and follow and comment, which I've seen a few comments already. Next week, I am extremely, extremely blessed to have Alan Adamson on with me. Alan's written 4 books on branding. He is a legend in the world of branding, and I am extremely honored to have him on the podcast. We'll talk about his career journey as well as the art of branding. We'll see you next week, and God bless. Thank you, everybody.